House believes that true democratic participation does not end with online advocacy. May I now call on the Prime Minister to open it.
This is a debate that asks us to evaluate the quality of participation behind online advocacies. And what we're going to define that here in opening government are advocacies that take place within the confines of cyberspace, wherein the actors which are involved are hidden, for example, behind the screens of their computer, and even sometimes are involved with the veil of anonymity in which their identities are hidden, for example, from the people that want to support their identity, their advocacy. And we say that the biggest question in this debate is whether or not, number one, the quality of discourse that is fostered because of these advocacies, but also secondly, the magnanimity of the results that it produces can equate to that form of true democratic participation that we're going to defend. So what is true democratic participation from opening government? We're going to say, Mr. Chair, that an essential component of true democratic participation is you're actively being there, for example, on the streets, rallying or protesting or lobbying, showing your face to the public, for example, and speaking there and not hiding from people behind your computer screens. Meaning that these people put a face behind the movement, that these people become active entities in that participation and not hidden entities at the end of the day. There are two different things. We're not going to say, coming from opening government, that online advocacies produce no discourse at all or produce no results. But what we are going to say is that compared to true democratic participation, the results that are produced by online advocacy is far less than that of true democratic participation. That's why we say that when you have an online advocacy, your true democratic participation has not yet been stamped. And there's still a lot more that you can do before you can say that you have maximized your powers as a democratic individual and have exercised that completely. Yes.
If they are not anonymous, would you consider it then? That's one. But secondly, do you consider a vote in itself a true democratic action?
We think that votation, for example, or that effort that you make to go into the voting booth and actually cast your vote, for example, are things that we might be able to consider as true democratic participation. I'm also going to argue that on the second developer point, even if you're not an anonymous entity online, we say that it's still not a true form of democratic participation because you're still being covered and you're still being hidden by those particular defense mechanisms, for example, such as that computer screen or your discussion exists in cyberspace. So here's the first thing that I'm going to argue as the Prime Minister. I'm going to take this from the perspective of the person or the people who are actually running this advocacy. I'm going to ask the question whether or not their advocacy is truly maximized when they put it online, for example, and just ask a lot of people, maybe you want to sign my petition, for example, or please read this story and appreciate what we're defending. We say, on the first level of argumentation, that in terms of relatability and actually being able to foster the strongest possible kind of change at the end of the day, we say that online advocacies fall blatantly flat of those kinds of things. That's why we say in status quo, the strongest revolutions and the strongest forms of, and when we've actually been able to create change in a democratic society, has not been through the internet or through cyberspace. We say that the democratic participation of individuals, especially these people who are the figureheads behind these particular movements at the end of the day, were the ones who had the guts to go out in public to say that this is what I want to happen, and this is what I want to happen, and address his supporters in person or lobby to the Congress in person at the end of the day. Why? We say that this kind of participation creates a relatable figure, Mr. Chair. A relatable figure that you don't get when you don't see this person or you only know him through his profile picture, for example, on that kind of advocacy. We think that in terms of the connections that are created through online advocacy, we think they're far less they're far less tangible than when you actually have these people out there participating in that true kind of democracy. But moreover, we think that even the confines of cyberspace itself is already inherently limiting to the kind of discussions that we can have. Why? Because when you take a look at engagements that occur in cyberspace, for example, like blogger versus blogger, and things like that, we think that the quality of that engagement, because it lacks that personal sort of rhetoric as compared to when we're debating here, for example, or when these two people are engaging in those kinds of discussion in comments and things like that. No, thank you. These kinds of discussions are far less relatable and are far less tangible, and therefore it's much more difficult for us to create change because people are less likely to be swayed by these kinds of things. That's why even if we have movement online, for example, we say that these kinds of debate tournaments that we have right now, like Worlds, for example, are things that people support far more, because the sort of things that we are able to create through this kind of discourse has a far greater impact on society than that of online discussions. No, thank you. But secondly, we say that the protection that's afforded by the veil of anonymity for a lot of these organizations, like Anonymous, for example, and all those other similar kinds of organizations, are things that cause these people to hide from society. Meaning that they have an advocacy, but they're afraid to show their identity, to defend it. And they have to hide behind these masks, for example, when they're hacking BSP and things like that. We say that this form of online advocacy is also an abrogation of true democratic participation, because you take away or you withhold a lot of responsibility, because you don't actually take responsibility for that. You just say, well, it was done by Anonymous, but we don't really know who owns Anonymous. We don't even know who are part of them. So we say, in terms of that kind of true democratic participation, people are more likely to be escapists of that online, when there's so much you can hide about your identity and who you really are as an entity. We say that if the core principle of democracy is for democratically empowered individuals, such as us debaters over here, to be able to discuss and create change in status quo, we say that the best way for us to do that is not through engaging through cyberspace, for example, but being here and being fearless, for example, to speak in front of a large audience and say, this is what we believe in and this is what we're willing to defend. Those kinds of things don't exist in the confines of cyberspace. And the messages that you try to create are severely compromised because, Mr. Chair, the relatability of your figure and your identity can be completely withheld, or it's still not as tangible at the end of the day. And for all those reasons, we think that if you want to truly participate in a democracy, we don't think that the internet is the best place to do that. Thank you.